Hyun-woo adjusted his formal diplomatic uniform one last time before the massive doors opened. The Galactic Council station stretched out before him like a city floating in space. Crystal towers twisted upward, connected by bridges that glowed with soft blue light. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at various levels, their designs as varied as the species that built them. This was humanity's first official invitation to join the Galactic Council. After 2 years of careful negotiations and cultural exchanges, Earth had finally been deemed ready for formal diplomatic relations. Hyun-woo carried the hopes of 8 billion humans on his shoulders. The council chamber itself was breathtaking. A massive dome of transparent material showed the stars beyond, while the floor was arranged in concentric circles. Representatives from different species sat in sections designed for their specific needs. Some areas had different gravity settings, others had special atmospheric controls. Hyun-woo took his assigned seat in the human section. The chair adjusted automatically to his height and weight. Around him, alien delegates chatted in various languages. His translation device hummed quietly in his ear, converting the sounds into words he could understand. The Vellani ambassador, Kethmar, approached with graceful steps. The Vellani looked almost human, except for their silver skin and large dark eyes. They had been humanity's first contact and had sponsored Earth's application to join the Council. Ambassador Hyun-woo, Kethmar said, his voice musical. "Welcome to your first council session. I trust your journey was comfortable?" "Yes, thank you," Hyun-woo replied. "The transport ship was very advanced. Much smoother than our early space flights." Kethmar smiled. "We have a tradition here for new members. Before we begin the formal session, we like to get to know our new colleagues better. It helps break the ice, as you humans say." Other ambassadors gathered around. Hyun-woo recognized some species from his briefings, the tall, thin Zephyrians with their blue skin and multiple arms, the rock-like Storlands who communicated through vibrations, the energy beings called Lumina who appeared as shifting clouds of light. "The question is simple," Kethmar continued. "We ask each new member the same thing. It helps us understand how different species think and approach problems." Hyun-woo nodded, curious. This seemed like a reasonable diplomatic exercise. "The question is this," Kethmar said. "What's the worst that could occur in this situation? Here, now, during your first council meeting?" The other ambassadors leaned forward with interest. This was clearly a well-established tradition. Hyun-woo paused. He had expected questions about Earth's resources, political systems, or cultural practices. This was different. But he had been trained for unexpected situations. "Well," he began slowly, "I suppose the worst-case scenario would start with a cascade failure." The ambassadors looked puzzled. Kethmar encouraged him to continue. "The life support systems could malfunction," Hyun-woo explained. "Not just here, in the chamber, but throughout the station. If the backup systems failed too, we'd have maybe 30 minutes of breathable air. But that's assuming the hull integrity holds." He could see confusion growing on the alien faces, but he continued. "The station's position near the star is maintained by gravitational anchors. If those failed during a life support crisis, we'd either fall into the star or drift into deep space. Both scenarios would be fatal, but falling into the star would happen faster." A Zephyrian ambassador made a sound that his translator couldn't convert. Other delegates were shifting uncomfortably. "But that's not the worst part," Hyun-woo said, warming to the topic. "The real problem would be if this wasn't an accident. If someone had sabotaged the station as part of a larger attack on the Galactic Council, they could have compromised the communication arrays so we couldn't call for help. Kethmar's silver skin had turned a pale shade of blue. Ambassador, surely you don't think— "Oh, I'm just answering the question," Hyun-woo said cheerfully. "You asked for the worst case. If this were an attack, they'd probably target the escape pods next, maybe plant bombs or just ensure they don't have enough fuel to reach safety. Anyone who did escape would carry word of the Council's destruction, which might be exactly what the attackers want." The energy being flickered nervously. Several delegates were now whispering among themselves. The psychological impact would be devastating, Hyun-woo continued. The Galactic Council has been a symbol of peace for thousands of years. Its destruction would create panic across hundreds of worlds. Some species might think others were responsible and start fighting. The entire galactic community could collapse into war. A Storland delegate began vibrating at a frequency that made nearby objects rattle. "But even that's not the absolute worst case," Hyun-woo said thoughtfully. "The worst would be if the attackers had a backup plan. Maybe they've already infiltrated the home governments of council members. While everyone is distracted by our deaths here, they could be launching simultaneous attacks on dozens of worlds." He paused, considering. "Or what if the station's destruction isn't meant to kill us, but to send us somewhere? The gravitational anchors could be modified to create a portal instead of just maintaining position. We could be transported to a hostile dimension or thrown back in time to disrupt historical events." The translator devices around the chamber began making distressed beeping sounds. Several were apparently overheating from trying to process concepts they had no reference for. "There's also the possibility," Hyun-woo added, "that this entire scenario is a test. Maybe the Galactic Council doesn't actually exist, and this is all a simulation designed to study human responses to diplomatic situations. In that case, my detailed analysis of catastrophic scenarios might be exactly what the testers want to see." Kethmar raised a shaking hand. "Ambassador, please, we were simply asking about normal concerns. Equipment failures, communication problems, minor disagreements." "Oh," Hyun-woo said, looking around at the pale, frightened faces. "You wanted the normal worst-case scenarios. Why didn't you say so?" He cleared his throat. "In that case, I suppose the worst normal thing would be if I accidentally insulted someone's cultural practices and caused a diplomatic incident. Though that could still lead to trade sanctions, which might destabilize regional economies and—" "Stop," Kethmar said quickly. That's quite enough." The other ambassadors were staring at Hyun-woo with expressions ranging from horror to fascination. The energy being had dimmed to barely visible levels. An elderly Zephyrian ambassador leaned forward. "Do all humans think this way?" Hyun-woo considered the question. "Well, we have a saying on Earth. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Most humans learn to consider negative possibilities so they can avoid them or be ready if they happen. But 17 different catastrophic scenarios," Kethmar whispered, "including dimensional portals and time travel?" "I only covered the basics," Hyun-woo said modestly. "I didn't want to take up too much time with details." The chamber fell completely silent. Even the background hum of the station's systems seemed muted. Finally, the council's senior administrator, an ancient being called Morandon, spoke up. "Perhaps we should postpone the formal session until tomorrow. Give everyone time to process this cultural exchange." As the delegates filed out in stunned silence, Hyun-woo wondered if he had said something wrong. He made a mental note to ask Kethmar later about proper diplomatic protocols. Behind him, he could hear whispered conversations in dozens of languages. His translator caught fragments. Dangerous, unpredictable, and terrifying imagination. Hyunwoo shrugged. At least nobody could say the meeting had been boring. Captain Da-eun watched the strange energy readings on her ship's main screen. The anomaly floated in space like a twisted knot of purple light, roughly the size of a city block. It pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost alive. Still no idea what it is, she asked her science officer. Tae-hyun shook his head. Nothing in our databases matches it, Captain. The energy signature is completely unknown. It's not giving off radiation, gravity waves, or electromagnetic fields. It's just there. The human exploration vessel Resilience had discovered the anomaly 3 days ago during a routine survey mission. They had immediately sent word back to Earth and requested any available expert assistance. What they got was something unexpected. Captain, Communications Officer Won-sik called out, "We're receiving a transmission from an approaching vessel. It's Zephyrian." Daeyeon raised an eyebrow. The Zephyrians were known for their advanced science, but they rarely ventured this far from their home systems. "Put them through." The main screen shifted to show a tall, blue-skinned alien with 4 arms and large, intelligent eyes. The Zephyrian wore the white robes of a research scientist. "Greetings, human vessel," the alien said in accented English. "I am Chief Scientist Velandra of the research ship Harmony of Thought. We detected the same anomaly and came to investigate. Perhaps we could work together?" Da-eun smiled. Cooperation between species was always welcome, especially when dealing with unknown phenomena. "We'd be happy to work with you, Chief Scientist. Please, come aboard." 2 hours later, both crews had gathered in the Resilience's main conference room. The Zephyrians had brought sophisticated scanning equipment, while the humans contributed their own instruments and databases. Velandra spread out holographic displays showing the anomaly from multiple angles. "Our preliminary scans suggest it may be some form of space-time distortion," she explained, "though the mechanism is unclear." Tae-hyun nodded, studying the data. "Our readings are similar. We're detecting temporal fluctuations around the edges, but they're very minor." "I propose we conduct a joint scanning operation," Velandra said. "If we synchronize our equipment, we might be able to gather more detailed information about its internal structure." The plan seemed straightforward. Both ships would position themselves at specific coordinates and activate their scanning arrays simultaneously. The combined data should reveal whatever was inside the anomaly. As they prepared to implement the plan, Velandra turned to Tae-hyun with genuine curiosity. "Before we begin, I must ask something. We Zephyrians always like to understand our partner's thinking. What do you believe could go wrong with this procedure?" Tae-hyun paused, his face growing serious. Da-eun recognized the expression. Her science officer was about to demonstrate why humans had survived everything the universe had thrown at them. "Well," Tae-hyun began, "first we need to consider that this might not be a natural phenomenon at all. The energy signature is too stable, too perfect. It could be artificial." Velandra looked interested. "You think it's some kind of technology?" "Possibly," Tae-hyun said. "Which means it could be a weapon. Maybe it's dormant, waiting for the right energy input to activate. Our scans might provide exactly the trigger it needs." The Zephyrian's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "A weapon? But it's just floating in empty space." "Perfect place for a trap," Tae-hyun replied. "Think about it. You put a mysterious, irresistible object in a remote location. Eventually curious, scientists show up to investigate. Then you spring whatever nasty surprise you've prepared. Dione watched as the Zephyrian scientists exchanged concerned glances. They had clearly never considered this possibility. But what if it's not a weapon? Taehyun continued. But a portal? A gateway to somewhere else. Our scans could destabilize it, causing it to expand or move. We might accidentally open a doorway to a hostile dimension. One of the younger Zephyrian scientists made a choking sound. Velandra's skin had shifted to a lighter shade of blue. Or, Taehyun said, warming to his subject, it could be a prison. Some ancient civilization might have trapped something dangerous inside that energy field. Break the containment, and we could release something that was locked away for good reasons. Surely, Velandra said weakly. You don't really believe. I'm just covering the possibilities, Taehyun said cheerfully. There's also the chance it's a test. Some powerful alien species might use these things to evaluate other civilizations. Depending on how we approach it, we could pass or fail their criteria. He pulled up a holographic display showing the Resilience's defensive systems. That's why I've prepared 17 different contingency protocols. Plan Alpha assumes it's a weapon and focuses on immediate evacuation. Plan Beta prepares for hostile entities emerging from a portal. Plan Gamma sets up containment procedures if we accidentally release something. Da-Yoon smiled proudly. This was why Taehyun was her best science officer. He didn't just study phenomena. He prepared for everything they might do. Plan Delta, Taehyun continued, covers the possibility that the anomaly is actually alive and might consider our scans an attack. Plan Echo assumes it's a trap set by pirates or slavers. Plan Foxtrot prepares for the scenario where it's a fragment of destroyed planet with unstable matter that could explode if disturbed. The Zephyrian scientists were now huddled together, whispering frantically in their own language. Plans Golf through Mike deal with various temporal anomalies, Taehyun explained. If it's a time distortion, we could accidentally erase ourselves from history or create paradoxes. Plan November assumes it's connected to other anomalies across the galaxy as part of some vast network. Velandra raised one of her 4 hands shakily. How many plans do you have? 17 main scenarios, Taehyun said, each with 3 to 5 sub-variants depending on specific conditions. Plan Quebec covers the possibility that our own scanning equipment has been sabotaged and will malfunction at a critical moment. He brought up another display showing the ship's weapon systems. I've also prepared tactical responses. If we need to destroy the anomaly, we have options ranging from photon torpedoes to ramming it with the ship. Captain Da-Yoon has agreed to evacuate the crew to the other ship if necessary, then convert the Resilience into a kinetic weapon. Da-Yoon nodded. Standard protocol when dealing with unknown threats. The Zephyrians stared at her in horror. You would destroy your own ship? Velandra whispered. Better than letting something dangerous escape, Da-Yoon replied practically. Ships can be replaced. Lives and civilizations can't. Taehyun nodded. That's why I also contacted Earth before we started. If this goes badly, they'll quarantine this entire system and warn other species to stay away. But, one of the younger Zephyrians protested, all we planned to do was take some sensor readings. Exactly, Taehyun said. That's when things usually go wrong. When you think you're doing something simple and safe. Velandra looked around the room at her fellow scientists. They all wore expressions of deep concern mixed with fascination. In Zephyrian culture, she said slowly, we prepared for equipment malfunction. Perhaps a minor energy feedback, At worst, we thought our sensors might be damaged. Those are good concerns, too, Tae-hyun said kindly. I have backup plans for equipment failure, but humans have learned that the universe doesn't usually stick to the simple, safe outcomes. He activated a final display showing evacuation routes and emergency procedures. The key is being ready for anything. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. The room fell silent except for the humming of the ship's systems. Finally, Velandra spoke up. Perhaps, she said carefully, we should postpone the scanning operation until we can implement some of your protocols. Tae-hyun smiled. That's probably wise. Better safe than sorry. As the meeting broke up, Da-un could hear the Zephyrian scientists discussing contingency plans in their own language. The translator caught phrases like dimensional warfare, temporal containment, and evacuation procedures. Later, in private, Velandra approached Da-un with obvious curiosity. Captain, she said, do all human scientists think like Officer A. Tae-hyun? Da-un considered the question. Most of them, she said finally. We call it Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong, so we try to be ready. Velandra nodded slowly. It must be exhausting, living with such constant worry. Not worry, Da-un corrected. Preparation. There's a difference. We're not afraid of bad things happening. We just make sure we're ready when they do. The Zephyrian scientist looked out at the mysterious anomaly floating in space. Perhaps that's why humans have survived so long in such a dangerous galaxy. Da-un smiled. Maybe. Or maybe we just got lucky that our paranoia turned out to be useful. The Trilateral Military Academy on Arcturus Prime was the most prestigious war college in the galaxy. Students from dozens of species came here to learn modern warfare, strategy, and tactics. The Academy's war games were famous throughout known, space for their realism and complexity. Instructor Jin-ho stood before a mixed class of cadets. Humans, Caltharians, and Nexari filled the lecture hall, their attention focused on the holographic display showing a star system with several planets and moons. Today we will study defensive strategies, announced the Academy's senior instructor, General Thakvar, of the Caltharian Empire. The massive bear-like alien gestured to the display with one clawed hand. We have a scenario that has been used to test military minds for over 50 years. The scenario appeared on screen. A small human colony world called Haven's Rest, populated by 50,000 civilians. Intelligence reports indicated that a pirate fleet of 12 ships was approaching, planning to raid the colony for supplies and slaves. The colony has a small defense force, General Thakvar explained. 6 patrol ships, orbital defense platforms, and a ground-based military unit of 500 soldiers. Your task is to defend the colony against the pirate attack. The Caltharian cadets immediately began discussing traditional defensive formations. The Nexari students, known for their tactical precision, started calculating optimal firing solutions for the defense platforms. General Thakvar turned to Jin-ho. Instructor Jin-ho, would you demonstrate human tactical thinking for our students? Jin-ho stepped forward and studied the scenario for a moment. The other instructors expected him to discuss patrol patterns, defensive positioning, or perhaps evacuation procedures for civilians. Instead, Jin-ho frowned and shook his head. This scenario is flawed, he said. The hall fell silent. General Thakvar's ears flattened against his skull. Flawed? This exercise has been used successfully for decades. That's the problem, Jin-ho replied. It's too simple, too convenient. 12 pirate ships don't just randomly attack a colony world without intelligence gathering. Someone had to tell them about Haven's Rest. Someone had to provide information about the defenses, population, and resources. He highlighted several points on the display. The pirates know exactly how many ships defend the colony. They know about the orbital platforms. This suggests either a security breach or inside information. The students began to murmur among themselves. This wasn't the kind of analysis they were used to hearing. Furthermore, Jinho continued, pirates don't usually attack unless they're confident of success. 12 ships against 6 defenders seems like fair odds, but pirates prefer overwhelming advantages. Unless... He paused, manipulating the holographic display to show the surrounding star systems. Unless this isn't really about raiding the colony. It's a distraction. General Thokvar leaned forward. A distraction from what? Jinho smiled grimly. That's what we need to figure out. 12 ships attacking one colony draws attention. It forces nearby military units to respond. While everyone is focused on Haven's Rest, what's happening elsewhere? He expanded the display to show a wider view of the region. There are 3 major trade routes within 2 days' travel. A military supply depot at Kepler Station, the regional communication hub at Proxima Junction. Any of these would be more valuable targets than a small colony. The Nexari instructor, Colonel Zexhai, spoke up. You're suggesting the pirates are working with someone else? I'm suggesting this whole scenario doesn't make sense unless there are factors we haven't been told about, Jinho replied. So let me present a real defensive strategy. I call it Operation Scorched Garden. He activated a new display showing detailed battle plans. The alien instructors leaned forward with interest. Step 1, Jinho began. We assume the colony has been infiltrated. Some of the colonists are working with the pirates, providing intelligence and possibly sabotaging defenses. We identify and isolate these agents while appearing to follow normal defensive procedures. A Caltharian cadet raised her hand. How do you identify infiltrators without alerting them? Simple, Jinho said. We give different information to different groups of colonists and see which information gets back to the pirates. Meanwhile, we begin evacuating civilians under the guise of safety precautions. He highlighted evacuation routes on the display. But we don't actually evacuate them. We relocate them to hidden positions where they can serve as intelligence assets. Every colonist becomes a potential spy, reporting on pirate movements and activities. The room was completely quiet now. This was unlike any defensive strategy they had ever heard. Step 2, Jinho continued. We assume our own defense force has been compromised. Pirates with inside information might have agents among our own people. So we implement compartmentalized command structures. No single person knows the complete battle plan. He showed a complex organizational chart. Each ship captain receives only the information needed for their specific role. Ground forces operate under independent command chains. Even I, as the overall commander, don't know all the details of every unit's orders. General Thokvar's claws were scraping against his desk. This level of paranoia seems excessive for a simple pirate raid. That's the point, Jinho said cheerfully. If it really is a simple pirate raid, these precautions are harmless. If it's something more complex, we're prepared. He moved to the next phase of his plan. Step 3. We let the pirates think they're winning. The orbital platforms put up token resistance before going offline. Our patrol ships retreat in apparent panic. The pirates land and begin their raid of what appears to be a poorly defended colony. But it's a trap, whispered a Nexari cadet. Exactly, Jinho confirmed. the colony becomes a kill box. Every building has been prepared with sensors, weapons, and defensive positions. The fleeing civilians are actually trained observers feeding us real-time intelligence. The pirates find themselves surrounded in a hostile environment where every door, window, and street corner could conceal a threat. He showed detailed urban warfare scenarios. Meanwhile, our retreating patrol ships have actually taken hidden positions throughout the system. They're monitoring all communication channels and scanning for additional hostile forces. The plan continued to unfold with increasing complexity. Jin-Ho had prepared for the possibility that the pirates were testing the colony's defenses for a larger invasion force. He had contingencies for dealing with hostages, biological weapons, and even the scenario where the pirates were being controlled by a hostile alien intelligence. Finally, Jin-Ho said, "If all else fails and we determine that the threat is beyond our ability to contain, we implement the final option." A new display showed the colony's power grid and industrial facilities. "We evacuate all remaining civilians and convert the entire colony into a kinetic weapon. The fusion reactors are overloaded while orbital mechanics are used to alter the planet's rotation. When the main pirate fleet arrives for their easy conquest, they find a world that's been turned into a massive bomb." The silence in the room was deafening. Several students were staring at Jin-Ho with expressions of horror and fascination. "You would destroy an entire planet?" General Thakvar asked in a strained voice. "Better than letting it fall into enemy hands and be used as a base for further attacks," Jin-Ho replied matter-of-factly. "Plus, the destruction would send a message to other potential raiders. Attacking human colonies is more trouble than it's worth." Colonel Zexhai slowly raised one of his 6 arms. "Instructor Jin-Ho, this is supposed to be a defensive exercise. You've presented a plan that involves espionage, urban warfare, psychological operations, and planetary destruction." "Defense isn't just about shooting at attackers," Jin-Ho explained. "It's about making sure they never want to attack you again. The best defense is making the enemy believe that any victory will cost more than it's worth." He gestured to the complex battle plans floating above them. "Every scenario I've presented assumes that the obvious situation is not the real situation. Humans have learned that enemies who attack openly usually have hidden advantages or secret plans." A Caltharian cadet spoke up nervously. "Do human colonies actually have these kinds of defenses?" Jin-Ho smiled. "I can't discuss specific security measures, but I can say that any human settlement that survives for more than a few years has probably learned some hard lessons about expecting the unexpected." General Thakvar looked around the room at his stunned students and fellow instructors. "I think we need to take a break," he said weakly. "Perhaps we should reconsider this exercise." As the students filed out in confused silence, Jin-Ho could hear fragments of conversation in various languages. His translator caught words like terrifying, brilliant, and never attacking humans. Later, in the faculty lounge, Colonel Zexhai approached Jin-Ho with obvious curiosity. "Instructor," the Nexari said, "do all human military officers think like you?" Jin-Ho considered the question while sipping his coffee. "Most of us learn to think several steps ahead," he said finally. "We call it scenario planning. Always ask, what if, and then what, until you've covered all the possibilities you can imagine." But 17 different contingency plans for a single battle. Mi Young had been an insurance adjuster for the Galactic Trade Consortium for 15 years. She had seen every type of claim imaginable: cargo lost to space pirates, ships damaged by asteroid storms, and goods contaminated by alien parasites. She thought she had seen everything until the human merchant walked into her office. Dong Wu appeared to be a typical independent trader. His clothes were practical, his manner polite, and his shipping credentials were in perfect order. He carried a standard insurance claim form and spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who dealt with bureaucracy regularly. "I need to file a claim for damaged cargo," he said, settling into the chair across from Mi Young's desk. Mi Young activated her recording system and pulled up the standard forms on her computer. This should be routine. "What was the nature of the damage?" she asked. "Spatial turbulence," Dongwu replied. "Minor fluctuations in hyperspace during the jump from Kepler 7 to Vega Station. Some of the more delicate items were affected." Mi Young nodded and began filling out the digital form. Spatial turbulence was common, especially in regions with high star density. Most cargo insurance covered such incidents as a matter of course. "And what was the estimated value of the damaged goods?" "About 37,000 credits, Dongwu said. "Mostly electronic components and rare minerals. I have the receipts and shipping manifests here." Everything seemed straightforward. Mi Young was already calculating the payout when she reached the standard question that every insurance company asked. "Before we process this claim," she said, "I need to ask our routine question. When you began this cargo run, what did you think could go wrong? This helps us assess risk factors for future policy adjustments." Dongwu paused and reached into his travel bag. "I actually prepared a document for this," he said, pulling out a thick folder. "I always try to be thorough with insurance requirements." Mi Young looked at the folder with surprise. Most traders gave a quick verbal response: engine failure or pirate attack. This was the first time anyone had brought documentation. "You wrote this down?" she asked. "Of course," Dongwu replied. "Proper risk assessment is essential for any successful business operation." He opened the folder and handed her a bound document. Mi Young looked at the cover page and felt her antennae twitch with confusion. "Contingency protocols for standard transport operations," she read aloud. "Version 12.3 by Captain Dongwu Park, independent merchant vessel Lucky Dragon." She flipped to the table of contents and her compound eyes widened. The document contained 847 pages. 847 pages? She whispered. "The appendices are quite detailed," Dongwu explained helpfully. "I like to be thorough." Mi Young turned to a random page and began reading. Her translator hummed as it processed the technical language. Section 23.7, Protocols for Accidental Discovery of Ancient Alien Artifacts, she read. Subsection A, Cursed or Haunted Objects. Subsection B, Technology that Achieves Sentience. Subsection C, Artifacts that Alter Reality. She looked up at Dongwu with growing concern. "You prepared for the possibility of finding cursed alien artifacts?" "You'd be surprised how often cargo runs intersect with archaeological sites," Dongwu said reasonably. "Better to have a plan and not need it than the other way around." Mi Young flipped to another section. Chapter 15. Interdimensional Incursions. What to do if your cargo ship accidentally travels to a parallel universe where the laws of physics are different. Her voice was getting higher with each word. Other adjusters in the office were beginning to stare. "That actually happened to my cousin," Dongwu said casually. "Took him 3 weeks to get back to our dimension. Lost an entire shipment of medical supplies because they turned into flowers in the alternate reality." Mi Young continued reading, her horror growing with each page. Chapter 31. Dealing with Time Loops. Chapter 45. What to do if your AI navigation system falls in love with an alien computer virus. Chapter 67, Protocols for Accidentally Starting an Interstellar War. That last one is mostly about filing the proper diplomatic paperwork, Dongwu explained. The key is to report the incident to all relevant authorities before the shooting starts. By now, Mi Young's supervisor, Kixtal, had noticed the commotion. The Centaurian approached with his characteristic measured steps, his crystalline head reflecting the office lights. "Is there a problem, Mi Young?" Kixtal asked in his precise, logical manner. "This human trader has provided an 847-page risk assessment document," Mi Young said weakly. "He's prepared for scenarios including alien possession, temporal paradoxes, and the possibility that his cargo ship might achieve consciousness and decide to become a pirate." Kixtal's optical sensors focused on the document. Centaurians were known for their mathematical precision and logical thinking. Surely he would find this as absurd as Mi Young did. Instead, Kixtal began reading with growing fascination. "Remarkable," he murmured. "Look at this decision tree for dealing with space-time anomalies. He's calculated probability matrices for 17 different types of temporal distortion." "You think this is reasonable?" Mi Young asked in disbelief. "The mathematics are quite sound," Kixtal replied, "though I confess I never considered the possibility that a routine cargo run might trigger the awakening of an ancient cosmic entity." Dongwu smiled modestly. Chapter 78 covers that scenario in detail. The key is recognizing the warning signs early. Unusual gravitational readings, spontaneous poetry appearing on your computer screens, crew members speaking in languages that don't exist yet. Mi Young flipped frantically through the pages. Section 156.3. What to do if your cargo attracts the attention of beings from a higher dimensional plane who want to recruit you for their cosmic war against entropy itself. "That's a long shot," Dongwu admitted. "But the universe is a strange place. I once met a trader who accidentally became the prophet of a machine religion just by delivering some computer parts to the wrong address." Kixtal was now completely absorbed in the document. "The contingency planning is extraordinary," he said. "He's prepared backup plans for his backup plans, and backup plans for the failure of his backup plans." Chapter 234, Mi Young read with growing hysteria, deals with the possibility that the entire universe is actually a simulation, and what to do if you accidentally discover the source code. "The trick is not to let the simulation's administrators know that you know," Dongwu explained. "I keep a copy of useful debugging commands in my ship's emergency kit just in case." Other adjusters had gathered around Mi Young's desk, drawn by the commotion. A Villani adjuster picked up the document and began reading random sections. "He has protocols for dealing with sentient diseases," she announced to the group, "and a detailed plan for what to do if his cargo ship gets drafted into military service by a species that doesn't realize it's not actually a warship." That happened. "To my friend Boram," Dongwu said. "She was hauling agricultural equipment when the Corzon Empire decided her ship looked like a stealth destroyer. Took 6 months to convince them it was just fertilizer and farming tools." Kixtal looked up from his reading with an expression of profound confusion. "Mr. Dongwu, this document suggests that you've prepared for scenarios that most species would consider impossible. Do you really believe these things could happen?" Dongwu shrugged. "I've been trading in space for 20 years. I've seen impossible things happen so often that I've stopped being surprised. The universe doesn't care what we think is reasonable." He pointed to a section of the document. "Chapter 445 is based on something that actually happened to me. I was delivering art supplies to a colony world when the paint turned out to be alive. Sentient, artistic paint that wanted to create a masterpiece. It took over the colony's buildings and started painting murals that could predict the future. The gathered adjusters stared at him in silence. "How did you resolve that situation?" Mi-young asked weakly. "I negotiated," Dongwu said simply. "Turns out the paint just wanted recognition for its artistic vision. We held a gallery opening, sold some of its work to collectors, and everyone was happy. Though I do carry art therapy protocols in my emergency kit now, just in case." Kixtal closed the document and looked around at his staff. "I need to calculate new risk assessment parameters," he said in a strained voice. "The probability matrices for human trade operations are unprecedented." "What does this mean for the insurance claim?" Dongwu asked politely. Mi-young looked at her supervisor, then at the document, then at the human trader who had somehow prepared for nearly 1,000 different ways his simple cargo run could go catastrophically wrong. "I have no idea," she admitted. "We've never had to process a claim from someone who's prepared for the possibility that their cargo might achieve sentience and start its own interstellar shipping company." "That's Chapter 623, Dongwu said helpfully. "Though in that case, I'd probably just become a business partner with my former cargo. It seemed like the most practical solution." Kixtal made a sound that was probably the Centaurian equivalent of a nervous breakdown. "I need to contact headquarters," he said, "and possibly our philosophers, and maybe our theologians." As word spread through the insurance office, more adjusters came to see. The Peace Summit on Meridian Prime was supposed to be a historic moment. After 3 centuries of brutal warfare, the Korthak Empire and the Silvani Federation had finally agreed to negotiate an end to their conflict. Representatives from dozens of neutral species had gathered to witness what many hoped would be the beginning of a new era of galactic peace. Xiongmin stood in the ornate conference hall, reviewing his notes one final time. As a human diplomat specializing in conflict resolution, he had been chosen as the neutral mediator for these crucial talks. The responsibility was enormous, but humanity's reputation for creative problem-solving had made them the preferred choice for such delicate situations. The Korthak delegation entered first. They were imposing creatures, standing nearly 3 meters tall with armored skin and multiple eyes arranged around their elongated skulls. Their leader, War Chancellor Grathmore, moved with the confident stride of someone accustomed to commanding vast armies. The Silvani delegation followed moments later. Where the Korthak were large and intimidating, the Silvani were graceful and ethereal. They appeared to be made of living crystal, their translucent bodies refracting light in beautiful patterns. Their spokesperson, harmony singer Lysandra, seemed to float rather than walk. "Welcome," Xiongmin said, gesturing to the circular table that had been specially designed to accommodate both species' physical needs. "Thank you both for taking this historic step toward peace. The initial sessions went better than expected. Both sides presented their grievances with surprising restraint. The Korthak complained about Silvani raids on their mining operations. The Silvani protested Korthak expansion into systems they considered sacred. These were the kinds of disputes that could be resolved through negotiation and compromise. By the 3rd day, they had made significant progress. Territorial boundaries had been established, trade agreements were being drafted, and both sides seemed genuinely committed to ending the violence. It was during the afternoon break that War Chancellor Grathmore approached Xiongmin with what seemed like a casual question. "Mediator Xiongmin," the massive alien said, "your species has a reputation for wisdom in these matters. Before we proceed with the final agreements, I would like your honest assessment. What could possibly go wrong with this peace process? Across the room, harmony singer Lysandra overheard the question and drifted closer. Yes, she said, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. We, too, would value your perspective on potential complications. Seung-min paused, looking between the two leaders. They seemed genuinely interested in his opinion, and he had been trained to provide thorough analysis when asked. Well, he began carefully, the most obvious concern is that this entire peace process could be a deception by one or both sides. Both leaders stiffened slightly, but Seung-min continued. For example, War Chancellor Grathmore, your acceptance of peace terms might be a stalling tactic while your military prepares for a massive offensive. The negotiations could be designed to make the Silvani lower their guard while you position your fleets for decisive strikes. Grathmore's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. That is a very specific concern. Or, Seung-min said, turning to Lysandra. The Silvani might be using these talks to gather intelligence about Korthak military capabilities. Every concession you make reveals information about your strategic priorities and resource limitations. The crystal being's light patterns flickered with what might have been surprise. But those are just the surface possibilities, Seung-min continued, warming to his analysis. The real concern is that this entire war might have been orchestrated by a third party. Both leaders looked confused. A third party? Grathmore asked. Think about it, Seung-min explained. You've been fighting for 3 centuries. Both your civilizations have spent enormous resources on military development. Meanwhile, other species have grown stronger while you've weakened each other. He activated a holographic display showing the galactic map. Who benefits from your conflict? Which species have expanded their territory while you've been distracted? Which governments have profited from selling weapons to both sides? The room grew very quiet. Other delegates from neutral species began shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Furthermore, Seung-min said, the timing of this peace summit is suspicious. Why now? Why did both sides suddenly become willing to negotiate after 3 centuries of refusing all diplomatic overtures? He highlighted several recent galactic events on the display. Unless there's an external threat that requires you to unite against a common enemy. Something so dangerous that your mutual survival depends on ending this war immediately. Lysandra's crystalline form began resonating with a low harmonic frequency. What kind of external threat? Could be anything, Seung-min replied. An extragalactic invasion force, a plague ship from dark space, the awakening of some ancient superweapon. Maybe the neutral species aren't as neutral as they claim, and they're preparing to conquer both your weakened civilizations. The neutral. Delegates in the observation gallery began murmuring nervously among themselves. But even if the peace process is genuine, Seung-min continued, the treaty itself could be a trap. The terms might contain hidden clauses that give one side advantages over the other, or the entire document could be designed to gradually transfer power to the mediating organizations. He gestured around the room. Who drafted the preliminary agreements? Who chose the neutral site for negotiations? Who selected the mediators and observers? Any of these decisions could influence the outcome in subtle ways. War Chancellor Grathmore was now looking around the room with obvious suspicion. You suggest that even the mediators cannot be trusted? I'm just being thorough, Seung-min said. For instance, humanity's role as mediator could be part of a larger strategy to position Earth as the dominant diplomatic power in this sector. Successfully mediating your peace would give us enormous influence over both your species. The other human diplomats in the room were staring at Seong-min with expressions of horror and fascination. There's also the possibility, he continued, that this entire scenario is a test. Some advanced alien species might be evaluating how different civilizations handle conflict resolution. Your war could be an experiment, and this peace summit could be the final phase of data collection. Harmony singer Lysandra's light patterns had shifted to deep, pulsing red. You believe we are subjects in some cosmic experiment? It would. Explain several anomalies, Seong-min replied thoughtfully. The war lasted exactly 3 centuries. Many of your battles followed patterns that seem almost choreographed. Both your species developed similar technologies at precisely the same rate. He pulled up historical data on the holographic display. Look at the casualty figures. The numbers are remarkably balanced. For every Korthak victory, there was a corresponding Silvani success, almost as if someone was carefully maintaining equilibrium. The room had fallen completely silent, except for the humming of the translation devices working overtime to process concepts they had no reference for. But the most concerning possibility, Seong-min said, is that peace itself might be more dangerous than war. Both leaders turned to stare at him. Your civilizations have been shaped by centuries of conflict. Your economies, governments, and social structures are all built around the need to fight each other. What happens when that purpose disappears? He showed population and resource projections on the display. Without a common enemy, both your species might fragment into civil wars. The Korthak military caste could turn on the civilian population. The Silvani collective consciousness might splinter into competing factions. Moreover, he continued, peace with each other might make you vulnerable to other threats. Your military forces are trained to fight each other's tactics. You might be completely unprepared for enemies who use different strategies. Seong-min paused, looking around the room at the stunned faces. And finally, there's the possibility that achieving peace will trigger some kind of automatic response from whatever force has been manipulating your conflict. Maybe the real war begins when you stop fighting each other. The silence stretched for several minutes. Finally, War Chancellor Grathmore spoke in a hoarse voice. How many different ways do you think this could go wrong? I've only covered the major categories, Seong-min replied. There are probably hundreds of specific scenarios, each with multiple variations depending on particular circumstances. Harmony singer Lysandra made a sound like glass breaking. Do all human diplomats analyze situations this thoroughly? We call it scenario planning, Seong-min explained. Always consider what could go wrong so you can prepare appropriate responses. He noticed that the Korthak and Silvani delegates were no longer glaring at each other. Instead, they were both staring at him with expressions of shared concern. Perhaps, War Chancellor Grathmore said slowly, we should discuss these potential threats. Yes, Lysandra agreed, her voice trembling with harmonics. If these dangers are real, we should prepare for them together. What happened next was unprecedented in diplomatic history. The two former enemies began working together to address the scenarios Seong-min had outlined. They shared intelligence about suspicious neutral. The emergency alert reached Galactic Emergency Response Headquarters at 0347 Standard Time. A mining platform on Titan's 7th had suffered a catastrophic structural collapse, trapping approximately 300 workers in the lower levels. Initial reports suggested a simple industrial accident. equipment failure, inadequate maintenance, the usual hazards of deep space mining operations. Boram was awakened by the emergency comm system in her quarters at the Kepler Station rescue facility. As the sector's chief rescue coordinator, she was automatically notified of any disaster requiring large-scale evacuation operations. "Details?" she asked, pulling on her uniform while reviewing the incoming data streams. "Mining platform Beta 7 on Titan 7, her assistant reported through the comm. "Partial structural collapse in sections 12 through 18. Unknown number of casualties. Local emergency services are requesting immediate assistance." Boram frowned as she studied the preliminary reports. Something felt wrong about the situation, but she couldn't identify what yet. "Assemble a standard rescue team," she ordered. "Multi-species medical unit, heavy equipment operators, structural engineers, and contact the Villani technical specialists. We'll need their expertise with mining. Equipment!" 2 hours later, the rescue fleet was approaching Titan 7th. The mining platform was a massive industrial complex built into the surface of the small moon, designed to extract rare minerals from the planet's crust. The collapsed sections were clearly visible as dark craters in the otherwise smooth facility. Captain Vexatel of the Villani rescue ship contacted Boram as they prepared to dock with the platform. "Coordinator Boram, we're ready to begin evacuation procedures. What complications should we prepare for?" It was a standard question. Rescue operations always involved unexpected difficulties, unstable structures, dangerous gases, equipment, failures. Boram was expected to give a brief assessment of likely problems. Instead, she activated her personal data pad and began reading from a document she had prepared during the flight. "First," she said, "we need to consider that this wasn't an accident." Captain Vextal's image on the communications screen showed his confusion. "Not an accident? But the preliminary reports clearly indicate structural failure." "That's what we're supposed to think," Boram replied. "Mining platforms don't just collapse randomly. They're designed with multiple redundant safety systems. For a failure this catastrophic to occur, several independent systems would have to malfunction simultaneously." She highlighted sections of the platform's structural diagram. "The collapse pattern is too regular, too contained. If this were a natural failure, we'd expect irregular damage spreading outward from the point of failure. Instead, we have clean breaks in specific load-bearing sections." The other rescue coordinators on the communication channel were listening with growing concern. "You think it was sabotage?" asked Dr. Lysandra, the chief medical officer. "Possibly," Boram said, "which means the saboteurs might still be here. They could be among the survivors planning to infiltrate our rescue teams. Or they might be waiting to trigger secondary explosions when our ships are docked." She pulled up tactical displays showing approach vectors and defensive positions. "That's why I've modified our rescue protocol. Instead of the standard evacuation procedure, we're implementing what I call Operation Safe Harbor." Captain Vextal looked uncomfortable. "What does that involve?" "First, we assume some of the trapped miners are working with the saboteurs," Boram explained. "We can't trust information from inside the facility until we verify it independently. Every survivor gets a full medical and psychological evaluation before being allowed onto our ships." She showed detailed screening procedures on her display. "We'll also implement compartmentalized communication protocols. No single person, including me, will have complete information about the rescue operation. This prevents compromised individuals from sabotaging the entire mission." Dr. Lysandra made a sound like wind through crystal formations. "You want to treat the survivors as potential enemies? I want to treat them as people who might be under coercion, Boram corrected. If the saboteurs have hostages or are threatening families, the survivors might be forced to cooperate. By limiting information flow, we protect both them and us, she moved to the next phase of her plan. Second, we assume the mining platform has been booby-trapped. Every rescue route will be cleared by automated probes before our teams enter. We'll use remote sensors to check for explosive devices, toxic gases, or structural traps. The display showed detailed maps of the facility with color-coded danger zones and alternative access routes. Third, Boram continued, we prepare for the possibility that this is a distraction from the real target. While we're focused on the rescue operation, the same group could be planning attacks elsewhere in the system. Captain Vextal's tentacles were now writhing with agitation. You believe there could be additional attacks? I've already contacted system defense to increase patrols around critical infrastructure, Boram replied. Mining operations often store valuable materials that could be used to manufacture weapons or fund further terrorist activities. She pulled up intelligence reports about recent suspicious activities in nearby systems. There's also the possibility that this entire incident is designed to lure rescue ships into a trap. Our vessels carry advanced medical equipment, communication systems, and transportation capabilities that would be valuable to hostile groups. What kind of trap? Dr. Lysandra asked nervously. Several possibilities, Boram said, activating a new set of tactical displays. They could have weapons hidden on the platform, ready to disable our ships once we dock. Or they might plan to use our own rescue equipment against us. Medical scanners can be converted into surveillance devices. Emergency transmitters can be reprogrammed to send false distress signals. The communication channel fell silent, except for the hum of ship systems. There's also the biological warfare scenario, Boram added. The survivors could be infected with a contagious pathogen. By rescuing them, we'd spread the disease to our ships and eventually to populated systems. She showed containment protocols and decontamination procedures. That's why every rescue team will operate in full environmental suits with independent air supplies. All survivors will be quarantined in sealed medical pods until we can verify they're not carrying infectious agents. Captain Vextal's image flickered as his ship's systems struggled to process the complexity of the modified rescue plan. Coordinator, this level of preparation seems extensive for a mining accident. If it really is just an accident, these precautions are harmless, Boram replied. If it's something more complex, we'll be ready. She activated the final set of protocols. Worst-case scenario. The entire mining platform is unstable and could collapse further at any moment. We've prepared for rapid evacuation of our own teams and emergency destruction of the facility if necessary. Destruction? Several voices asked simultaneously. If the platform contains dangerous materials or technology that can't be allowed to fall into hostile hands, we may need to ensure its complete destruction, Boram explained. I've coordinated with the system defense fleet to provide orbital bombardment if ground-level demolition isn't sufficient. The rescue operation proceeded according to Boram's modified protocols. Teams moved cautiously through the facility, checking for traps and scanning every survivor before evacuation. The medical units implemented full biological containment procedures. What they found exceeded even Boram's paranoid expectations. The structural collapse had been caused by carefully placed explosive charges. Several of the trapped miners were actually off-world mercenaries who had infiltrated the facility weeks earlier. The real miners were being held hostage in a sealed section that would have been overlooked in a normal rescue operation. The mercenaries had indeed planned to use the rescue ships to escape the system with stolen mining equipment and rare mineral samples. They had also planted biological agents in the facility's air recycling system, intending to infect the rescue teams. Most disturbing of all, the attack was coordinated with similar operations on 3 other mining platforms in nearby systems. Only Boram's request for increased system defense patrols had prevented the other attacks from succeeding. When the rescue operation concluded 18 hours later, 297 miners had been safely evacuated, 14 mercenaries had been captured, and a major terrorist network had been dismantled. Captain Vexital requested a private communication with Boram as the rescue fleet prepared to depart. "Coordinator," he said, his tentacles still showing signs of stress, "your preparations were remarkably prescient. How did you know to expect these complications?" Boram considered the question while reviewing the mission reports. "I didn't know," she said finally, "but mining accidents that require large-scale rescue operations are perfect opportunities for hostile groups to cause maximum damage. It's a pattern we've seen before." "We have?" Captain Vextal asked. "Humans have," Boram clarified. "We've learned that when something seems too simple or convenient, it usually isn't. Emergency situations create chaos, and chaos creates opportunities for people with bad intentions." The ancient ruins on Zerion 9 had been discovered purely by accident. A routine geological survey had detected unusual energy signatures beneath the planet's surface, leading to the excavation of structures that were clearly artificial, but unlike anything in the known archaeological record. Within weeks, the discovery had attracted attention from across the galaxy. The Ethereal Collective, renowned for their archaeological expertise, organized a joint expedition involving scientists from dozens of different species. It was to be the largest xenoarchaeological project in recorded history. Wu Jin arrived on Zerion 9 aboard the research vessel Academic Progress, carrying equipment that made the other scientists curious. While most of the expedition members brought standard archaeological tools, scanners, excavation devices, sample containers, Wu Jin's cargo manifest included items that seemed oddly out of place. The expedition's base camp was established near the main excavation site. The ruins themselves were magnificent, crystalline structures that seemed to grow from the planet's bedrock, covered in symbols that shifted and changed when viewed from different angles. Dr. Lysandra, the ethereal team leader, called the first general meeting in the main research tent. Scientists from a dozen species gathered around holographic displays showing the initial survey data. "The structures appear to be approximately 50,000 years old," she announced, her luminous form casting rainbow patterns on the tent walls. "The construction materials are unknown, and the architectural style doesn't match any civilization in our records." The assembled scientists murmured with excitement. This could be evidence of a previously unknown ancient species, possibly one of the galaxy's first technological civilizations. "The energy signatures are stable but unusual," Dr. Lysandra continued. "We detect no immediate hazards from radiation or toxic materials. The site appears perfectly safe for detailed exploration." She gestured to the excavation schedule displayed above them. "We'll begin with surface mapping and gradually work our way deeper into the structures. Each team will focus on specific areas of expertise: linguistics, materials analysis, energy systems, cultural artifacts." As the meeting prepared to conclude, Dr. Lysandra turned to Wu Jin with the question that had become standard practice when working with human specialists. "Dr. Wu Jin, before we begin excavation, what complications do you think we should prepare for?" Wu Jin had been studying the survey data during the briefing. Now he activated his personal display and began what would later be called the Xerion 9. Safety briefing. First, he said, we need to consider that these aren't ruins at all. The tent fell silent. Dr. Lysandra's light patterns flickered with confusion. Not ruins, but they're clearly ancient structures. They look ancient, Wu Jin corrected, but appearances can be deceiving, especially when dealing with unknown technology. These could be recently constructed facilities designed to appear old. He highlighted anomalies in the survey data. The energy signatures are too stable for structures that are supposedly 50,000 years old. The materials show no signs of weathering or decay. Even the symbols on the walls are perfectly preserved. A Centaurian scientist spoke up. You suggest this is some kind of elaborate deception? Possibly, Wu Jin replied. But more likely we're looking at technology that doesn't age the way we expect. Self-repairing materials, temporal stasis fields, or construction methods that create structures outside normal space-time. He activated a new display showing defensive preparations, which means we need to be prepared for the possibility that the structures are still operational. Not ruins, but facilities that are merely dormant. Dr. Lysandra's form began to pulse with nervous energy. Operational? You mean inhabited? Or automated, Wu Jin said. Many advanced civilizations create guardian systems to protect important sites. Our excavation activities might trigger defense mechanisms that have been waiting for millennia. He showed detailed contingency plans on his display. That's why I've brought electromagnetic pulse generators, signal jammers, and portable shield projectors. If we accidentally activate something hostile, we'll need ways to disable or deflect it. The other scientists were now staring at his equipment manifest with growing alarm. But that's not the only concern, Wu Jin continued. These symbols that change when viewed from different angles? That's not normal decorative art. It suggests adaptive interfaces, technology that responds to observers. He zoomed in on images of the shifting symbols. The structures might be scanning us as we examine them, learning about our species, our technology, our weaknesses. Every moment we spend here gives them more information about potential threats. A Villani archaeologist raised a tentative hand. Dr. Wu Jin, surely you don't believe these ruins are actually studying us? The symbols change in response to observation, Wu Jin replied matter-of-factly. That requires some form of intelligence, whether artificial or otherwise. The question is, what does that intelligence intend to do with the information it's gathering? He brought up historical data about similar archaeological discoveries. There are 17 documented cases of excavation teams discovering ancient sites that turned out to be active facilities. In 12 of those cases, the archaeological teams disappeared or were transformed in some way. The tent had grown very quiet. Several scientists were beginning to edge toward the exits. Then there's the possibility that the artifacts themselves are the real danger, Wu Jin said, moving to the next section of his briefing. Objects that can preserve themselves perfectly for 50,000 years might have other unusual properties. He showed images of various scanning equipment and protective gear. Some might be sentient, others could be infectious, not biologically but informationally. Ideas or concepts that spread from mind to mind like viruses. Dr. Lysandra made a sound like wind through broken glass. Infectious ideas? Mimetic hazards, Wu Jin confirmed. Knowledge that damages the minds that contain it. The symbols we're seeing could be carriers for dangerous information. Just looking at them might expose us to psychological contamination. He activated detailed psychological screening protocols. That's why I've brought portable isolation chambers and cognitive assessment equipment. If anyone starts showing signs of mental alteration, they'll need immediate containment and treatment. A young Zephyrian scientist raised one of her 4 arms. How would we recognize psychological contamination? Sudden personality changes, obsessive behavior regarding the artifacts, speaking in languages that don't exist, geometric patterns appearing in their artwork, Wu Jin listed. Also, mathematical insights that seem to come from nowhere, dreams about impossible architectures, and the inexplicable certainty that the excavation must continue no matter what happens. Half the research team was now looking around nervously at their colleagues. But even if the artifacts are harmless individually, there's the cumulative effect to consider, Wu Jin continued. These structures were built by an unknown civilization with unknown purposes. We don't know what they were designed to do when fully activated. He showed schematic analyses of the site layout. The energy distribution patterns suggest this entire complex is actually a single massive device. Every artifact we remove, every wall we examine, every symbol we decode might be contributing to some larger activation sequence. You think we might accidentally turn the entire site into a weapon? Dr. Lysandra asked in a strained voice. Or a transportation device, or a communication array, or a dimensional gateway, Wu Jin replied. The energy readings are consistent with several different possibilities, none of them necessarily safe. He brought up evacuation plans and emergency protocols. That's why I've arranged for orbital monitoring and prepared several different evacuation scenarios. If the site begins showing signs of large-scale activation, we may have only minutes to escape. The display showed detailed procedures for emergency evacuation, including contingencies for scenarios where normal transportation might not be available. Finally, Wu Jin said, there's the possibility that we're not the first ones to find this site. The tent was now completely silent except for the humming of environmental systems. The discovery was supposedly accidental, but was it really? Maybe someone guided us here deliberately. Maybe this entire expedition is part of someone else's plan, he explained. He showed intelligence reports and background checks on expedition members. I've run security analyses on everyone involved in organizing this project. Most check out clean, but there are some anomalies that concern me. The scientists began looking at each other with suspicion. 3 team members have connections to organizations that profit from selling ancient artifacts. 2 others have received funding from sources that can't be fully verified. And 1 person's background includes expertise in areas that aren't relevant to archaeology, but would be very useful for activating unknown technology. Dr. Lysandra's light patterns had shifted to deep red. You suspect sabotage from within. Our own team? I suspect that any discovery this significant attracts attention from people with various agendas, Wu Jin said diplomatically. Not everyone who joins an archaeological expedition is interested in pure scientific research. 1 year had passed since Hyun Woo's first appearance at the Galactic Council, and the changes were obvious even before the session began. The council chamber had been completely redesigned. What had once been an open, welcoming space now resembled a fortress. Thick protective barriers surrounded each delegation's seating area. Emergency exits had been tripled in number and equipped with independent life support systems. The chamber's central dome, previously transparent to show the beauty of space, was now covered with armored plating that could withstand direct weapon strikes. Most telling of all were the blast doors. Massive, military-grade barriers stood ready to seal off sections of the chamber at a moment's notice. Each door was marked with warnings in dozens of languages. though the most prominent text was in simple galactic standard. Emergency containment protocols, authorized personnel only. Hyun-woo noticed these changes as he took his seat in what was now called the human containment section. The area was surrounded by additional shielding and equipped with what appeared to be sound-dampening equipment. A small placard on his desk read, "Human Delegate, Psychological Impact Minimization, Protocols in Effect." Ambassador Kethmar of the Vallani approached hesitantly, staying well outside the designated containment perimeter. His silver skin had a nervous sheen, and his large eyes kept darting toward the nearest emergency exit. "Ambassador Hyun-woo," he said, his musical voice slightly strained. "Welcome back to the Council. I trust your journey was uneventful?" "Very smooth, thank you," Hyun-woo replied cheerfully. "Though I did notice some interesting modifications to the station's defensive systems on the way in. Very thorough work." Kethmar's skin shifted to a pale blue color. "Yes, well, we've implemented some upgrades to our safety protocols." The session was called to order by Council Leader Morandon, an ancient being whose species was so old that their name was simply the First Ones. Morandon's form was roughly humanoid, but seemed to be made of living starlight, constantly shifting between different configurations. "Distinguished delegates," Morandon announced, his voice resonating through the chamber's new acoustic dampening systems. "Before we begin today's session, the Council must address certain procedural modifications that have been implemented since our last gathering." A holographic display appeared above the chamber, showing a document titled Galactic Council Safety Protocols, Human Interaction Guidelines, version 3.7. After extensive consultation with our xenopsychology department, our risk assessment specialists, and several emergency therapy clinics, Morandon continued, the Council has determined that certain traditional practices require adjustment. Murmurs spread through the chamber in dozens of different languages. Hyun-woo could see delegates from various species exchanging nervous glances. "Effective immediately," Morandon announced, "the traditional diplomatic question, 'What's the worst that could occur?' is hereby banned when addressing human representatives." The chamber erupted in sounds that the translation system struggled to process. Relief, validation, and residual trauma mixed together in a cacophony of alien emotions. Furthermore, Morandon said, raising his voice to restore order, "All human input regarding potential negative outcomes must be filtered through approved intermediaries and subjected to psychological impact assessment before being shared with the General Assembly." A new display showed the filtering process. Human scenarios would be reviewed by a panel of xenopsychologists, classified according to a new rating system, and presented to other delegates only after appropriate mental health warnings. The rating system, Morandon explained, ranges from level 1, mildly disturbing, to level 7, existentially terrifying. Any scenario rated level 5 or above requires mandatory counseling for all delegates who hear it. Hyun-woo raised his hand politely. "Council Leader, what happens if I have something important to contribute that might be rated level 5 or above?" The chamber fell deadly silent. Several delegates immediately activated personal emergency beacons. The blast doors began their automated pre-closure sequence before Morandon quickly countermanded the order. "Ambassador Hyun-woo," Morandon said carefully, "such situations will be handled through private consultation with specially trained psychological counselors who have been conditioned to withstand human-level scenario analysis." "That seems reasonable," Hyun-woo said, Though I should mention that I've been reviewing the Council's new safety protocols, and I noticed some potential issues that might be worth discussing. The emergency evacuation alarm began sounding automatically. Half the delegates were already moving toward the exits before Morandin could override the system. "Attention, all delegates," the station's AI announced in a voice that managed to sound both calm and terrified. "Human scenario analysis detected. Initiating protective measures. Please remain calm and proceed to designated safe areas." "Override emergency protocols," Morandin commanded. "This is a false alarm." The AI paused for several seconds, apparently processing this contradictory information. "Override acknowledged. However, psychological support teams are standing by, if needed." As order was slowly restored, Morandin turned back to Hyunwoo with an expression that might have been resignation among his species. "Ambassador," he said wearily, "perhaps you could submit your concerns in writing through the appropriate channels." "Of course," Hyunwoo replied. "I'll prepare a brief summary of the major issues, just the basics, maybe 15 or 20 categories of potential problems." 3 different species delegates immediately requested medical attention. The chamber's automated systems began dispensing emergency anxiety medication through the ventilation system. Dr. Lise Andra of the Ethereal Collective, who served as the Council's chief psychologist, approached the human section with obvious reluctance. She wore what appeared to be specialized protective equipment, mental shielding devices that had been developed specifically for interacting with human scenario planners. "Ambassador Hyunwoo," she said, her voice artificially modulated through. "The psychological protection gear, would it be possible to limit your analysis to, shall we say, the most likely 5 scenarios?" Hyunwoo considered this thoughtfully. "Well, the 5 most likely problems are fairly straightforward. There's the possibility that the new safety protocols themselves create vulnerabilities that hostile forces could exploit. The psychological conditioning of staff might make them more susceptible to certain types of manipulation. The emergency systems could be turned against the station by anyone who understands their activation triggers." Several delegates were now openly weeping. The Storland representative was vibrating at a frequency that was causing nearby equipment to malfunction. "Then there's the concern that all these safety measures might actually be part of someone else's plan," Hyunwoo continued. "What if an enemy wanted to turn the Galactic Council into a fortress? Making us afraid and paranoid serves their purposes." "Perfectly. And the 5th scenario?" Dr. Lysiandra asked in a voice barely above a whisper. "The possibility that I'm not actually human," Hyunwoo said cheerfully. "That I'm some kind of psychological weapon designed to spread anxiety and paranoia through the galactic community, in which case, this entire conversation is going exactly according to plan." The silence that followed was so complete that the chamber's environmental system seemed loud by comparison. Even the automated systems appeared to be holding their breath. Finally, Ambassador Talmesh of the Cordite Republic spoke up from behind his reinforced barrier. Are you actually suggesting that you might not be human?" "Oh, I'm definitely human," Hyunwoo assured him. "I was just demonstrating how even the most basic scenario analysis can reveal uncomfortable possibilities. Human thinking tends to follow these patterns naturally." "Naturally?" Morandin repeated weakly. "It's a survival trait," Hyunwoo explained. "Our ancestors lived in a dangerous environment where assuming the worst-case scenario helped them stay alive. We've just applied that same thinking to more complex situations." He gestured around the fortified chamber. "Though I have to say, Your security improvements are quite impressive, very thorough, almost as if you've learned to think like humans yourselves. Dr. Lysandra removed her psychological protection equipment with shaking hands. Ambassador, do you realize what you've done to us? Hyunwoo looked genuinely puzzled. I answered some questions and provided a few basic risk assessments. Nothing unusual. Nothing unusual? Kethmar said from behind his protective barrier. You've turned the most peaceful organization in the galaxy into a fortress. You've made us all paranoid. Not paranoid, Hyunwoo corrected gently. Prepared. There's a difference. The session ended early when the council voted unanimously to adjourn for emergency psychological recovery time. As delegates filed out through the multiple security checkpoints, Hyunwoo could hear them discussing new safety measures, backup plans, and contingency protocols. Later, in his private quarters, Hyunwoo reviewed the day's events with satisfaction. The Galactic Council was clearly taking security more seriously, which could only be good for everyone's long-term survival. He was interrupted by a communication from Earth. The message was,